So you want me to tell you the story of my life? I'll tell you all of it. I'm flesh and blood, but not human.
I watched Interview with a Vampire for the first time the other night with the intent of making a questionable castings episode out of it, after reading numerous articles that resurfaced a few years ago about how grossed out Kirsten Dunst was about having to kiss a 30-year-old Brad Pitt when she was only 11.
Although I thought it was disgusting. It was like, I was 11. It would have been weird if I was like, this is amazing, I'm kissing Brad Pitt.
But when I saw the scene and the context of the film, I honestly didn't see much there, not taking away from her experience, but this was nothing like the other questionable castings that I've covered about the overt sexualization of young girls in media. And if you haven't watched those yet,
what are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
A linked playlist will be down in the description. There was this one scene though, an Interview with a Vampire, however, that got my mind jogging, and I'll insert a modified version of it here. This got me thinking about what once ruled in the horror genre, and that's the portrayal of helpless, bare-naked ladies at the hands of monsters. In fact, the formula, albeit intellectually lazy, is quite simple and widely known, and that is violence plus nudity equals a Hollywood win. I can't say that this surprises me, as statistics do show, even though the gap isn't huge, men do watch horror more often than women do. And my gut says that the general trend is that women are more into the supernatural and psychological subgenre of horror, opposed to the gore and slasher flicks that tend to feature the popular violence plus nudity formula. Am I often assuming this? Let me know your preferred subgenre of horror down below. And honestly, I used to be really into spooky season, Halloween, and watching scary movies. The best were the ones where college kids venture off into some hick town and don't realize that something's off until it's too late. But nowadays, I don't watch that stuff as much. I just try to steer clear of demonic media, as it just doesn't sit well with my spirit anymore. But Interview with a Vampire was a good movie. I really enjoyed the humor of the relationship dynamics in this twisted makeshift family. So this long overdue video will be my musings on why I think audiences love to see women suffer, because that movie does feature a lot of suffering heavily on one specific gender. But first, why do these films need to make the already vulnerable more vulnerable? And I'm talking about the cliche nudity, whether it's in the shower, during intimacy, or on some sacrificial altar right before the subject is ripped to shreds. The easy answer is that men like seeing boobs, Hollywood win. But diving a bit deeper, the state of being bare in the presence of anyone other than your lover, unless it's your profession, would leave most people feeling a little, if not a lot, embarrassed and ashamed. If you grew up in a Christian household, this is one of the first stories of the Bible. Adam and Eve covering themselves after their sins with figs and leaves once they realized they were naked. They were embarrassed. Drugging the victim or an intoxicated victim is also a way to ensure that they're in their most vulnerable state. But in these slasher flicks, the women must be completely helpless. By literally stripping them down to nothing, the women must suffer a shameful ending. No dignity is granted. It's a humiliation ritual. Being fully equipped and ready to fight back does not satiate the male viewer. It's actually a crazy juxtaposition when you think about it. Like powerfully strong vampires, beasts, devils, monsters, and men need to completely disarm and strip their victims down. It's almost necrophilic. A classic example of this is in the Alfred Hitchcock thriller Psycho, and you can check out that full video here. But Norman Bates had this woman alone all night, They break bread together, talk about hobbies and taxidermy, yet he waits until she's showering to kill her. Part of this is about disarming women, in this case, making Marion feel at ease with dinner and polite conversation before lunging at her when she's completely nude and helpless in the shower. The character of Patrick Bates in American Psycho also disarms women before he plunges. He disarms with his money, his status, and his pedantic rants about 80s classical pop music.
I think Invisible Touch is the group's undisputed masterpiece. It's an epic meditation on intangibility.
Tom Cruise's character in Interview with a Vampire disarms women with his natural charm before sticking his fangs in them, encouraging his protege to do the same. But you get the trend: make them feel comfortable, get their guards down, then strike. That behavior sounds oddly familiar. There is also a theme in many cult horror films that's a precursor to dying a shamefully nude death, and that's the punishment of women for sexual independence. Friday the 13th is rife with this scenario of frisky counselors at Camp Crystal Lake suffering after their intimate indiscretions. But Cabin in the Woods, which is oddly classified as a comedic horror, sums up this trope perfectly. The entire film tries to touch on every genre of horror one could imagine, but the premise is that a group of scientists engineer this elaborate plot to sacrifice 5 character archetypes to save humanity. And those characters are the virgin, the jock, the scholar, the fool, and the whore. College student Jules, who is stereotyped as the whore or the fast one in the film, is overtly and sexually confident. She doesn't play small and is unafraid to showcase her body and her carnality. And unsurprisingly, is literally the first one to die in the woods while having sex with her boyfriend on their camping trip. Because how dare she be so bold? So Cabin in the Woods is sort of an homage to the classic slasher flicks like Halloween and Friday the 13th, where sex, specifically premarital sex, and death are intertwined. Oftentimes, characters who engage in these forbidden rendezvous are the first to go, punishing women for daring to celebrate their bodies and parade around their enjoyment of intimacy. When I think of classic horror films, almost all of my immediate examples are films where either women or children, like It, Child's Play, The Shining, are suffering. And yes, in the past decade, filmmakers like Jordan Peele have broken that mold in transitioning the main victims of psychological horror from women to now people of color, with films like Get Out, Us, Nope, and Candyman. And even preceding that, in the early 2000s, you have some outliers like Jeepers Creepers and Jennifer's Body. But even Jennifer suffered at the hands of a man before turning into a man-eating vampire. So point is that we've come a very long way. But classic cult horror, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s horror, the people who got terrorized, the ones who died these shameful, humiliating deaths, the ones that got sacrificed, there is a clear pattern. And even the ones who survived, like Laurie in Halloween or Dana, the Virgin, in Cabin in the Woods, only do so after enduring and the audience witnessing a brutal amount of violence inflicted on them. It's assault and battery lore. I was even watching this recent, 2022 thriller on Hulu starring Emma Roberts titled Abandoned. And it's about this couple and their newborn baby who move into an isolated haunted farmhouse. And Sarah, Emma Roberts' character, is the one who is terrified the entire time. She's the one experiencing all of the paranormal activity of their new home, the home the husband wanted to move into and she was apprehensive about. She's the one being taunted by the ghost the entire time while he just goes to work. He starts being gaslighty when he notices that she's off, blames her for missing items in the house, and is overall completely oblivious to what she's experiencing. The entire film was so frustrating to watch, but she's the one who suffers while he just kind of is ignorant of it all. And speaking of Emma Roberts, does anyone remember the satirical horror show Scream Queens about a serial killer terrorizing a sorority house? If you haven't seen that, it's on Hulu, and this is the perfect season to watch it. Thank me later. But the character of Chanel Oberlin is hysterical, and that show has the type of comedy, much like The Office, that could not be made today. But back to women's suffering as a historical main plot point. We can't ignore the elephant in the room that classic cult horror was largely written, directed, and produced by men. And when you see refreshing outliers like Jennifer's Body, that's the result of women writing and directing these stories. Perhaps it's because there is this ingrained societal thought that men aren't supposed to be scared. They're not supposed to be afraid. That's not viewed as being either brave or masculine. So they largely couldn't be the victims in classic horror. They could not be the ones who suffer and feel pain. They are the hunters, the predators, and they must inflict on their prey. After all, suffering is supposed to be reserved for the weak.